The Premier described it as a bad day, but then it got a bit worse. We're on the brink of even tighter restrictions, and a new outbreak in a major regional city could see the whole of Victoria involved. The state woke to 55 new local cases, only 25 in isolation while infectious, and 6 cases are of unknown origin. And then late today came confirmation of 12 more infections in the north central Victorian city of Shepparton. We have 15 people in hospital, 6 in intensive care. And the Premier says if we don't have greater compliance this weekend, there'll be more people in hospital. So health officials met this afternoon to consider what more can be done. Let's bring in state political reporter Richard Willingham now. Rich, the Premier's message was certainly clear. Just how worried are the authorities about the situation, and what are their options?
Well, Mary, they're very, very worried, and they're mostly worried because there's these 30 cases that weren't in isolation. There's cases that are popping up all over, not just Melbourne now, but also Shepparton in regional Victoria. It started with 1 this morning. There's now 12 cases in that city. They've asked authorities to look at what options they could look at to tighten restrictions further and possibly go to a statewide lockdown. Now, there's going to be no announcement tonight, but there could be announcements as early as tomorrow. Other options on the table could be further tightening restrictions around hospitality and construction, which is operating at 25%. Now, no decisions have been made. The government has asked authorities to look at options. They've been discussing those all afternoon and into the evening. But the big issue they've got is compliance. They want people to obey the rules. There's also compliance around people who are in isolation, with concern some people who have got COVID or are at a high exposure site aren't following the 14 days isolation. They're particularly concerned about Newport, where there's been a drip of new cases. Leanne Wong has today's developments.
From Shepparton to Melbourne, Victorians are on notice.
We are right on the edge of this getting away from us.
With more than 50 new infections, including in regional Victoria for the first time this outbreak, health officials are bracing for more and are begging people to follow the rules.
If we have a weekend this weekend like last weekend, well then next week it will be like Sydney. Simple as that.
This morning, a man in his 30s in Shepparton was found to have contracted the virus. By afternoon, 11 of his family members had also tested positive. A Bendigo business has now been listed as a Tier 2 exposure site.
We know this virus moves more quickly than the previous versions of the virus, so what we're really encouraging people to do is to come forward for testing straight away.
Of today's cases, 6 have yet to be linked, and more than half spent time in the community while infectious.
Right now, we are not heading in the right direction.
Another 6 cases are linked to 2 separate clusters in St Kilda. While Broadmeadows has become a new target for authorities after a youth centre was linked to 13 infections, the source of which is still unknown.
This is very, very serious indeed.
There is a way out of it. Let's have some positivity. Let's have some hope. There's no hope when the government's trying to scare the hell out of us for politics.
And as the outbreak continues, so too does the financial pain. This queue in Yarraville is for food hampers being given out by Foodbank for those struggling in lockdown. An extra $807 million in business support has been pledged by the state and federal governments, but many businesses are still waiting to receive payments from previous lockdowns.
If the government delays and all the debts will standing there, and how can we pay them because our accounts are empty? We can't pay.
The way out of this outbreak lies with vaccination, but there are concerns for those who can't yet get the jab. Of the more than 350 active cases now in Victoria, almost half are in people aged under 20. And the state government wants to vaccinate every student from grade 6 and above by the end of this year. Leanne Wong, ABC News, Melbourne.
And Courtney Howe joins us now from Shepparton. Courtney, as we've heard, the situation has developed quickly there today. Take us through what's happened.
Yes, it certainly has. This morning, Goulburn Valley Health was notified of a man in his 30s from Kyalla that had tested positive to coronavirus. Now, he has a connection to the St Mel's Primary School here in Shepparton, and soon enough, parents were being called to pick up their students as the school was closed for deep cleaning. And not long after, 2 campuses at the Shepparton Secondary College were also closed, and kids were picked up from there and told to go straight home. Now by 2:30, Goulburn Valley Health had told us there'd been an additional 6 people test positive to coronavirus, and tonight, of course, that total is now up to 12. Now, 11 of those cases are all family members of the original man in his 30s who tested positive, and those all 12 cases are now across 2 households.
And Courtney, how has the community there reacted to the developments?
Well, as you can imagine, there's a lot of concern in the community at the moment. As news broke today of more cases, the testing lines here in Shepparton were getting longer. The drive-through testing site at the sports precinct where I am tonight, cars were lining up, and obviously that guy there is very happy to get tested. But people were lining up before it had even been established, and tonight, as you can see, they're continuing to line up to get tested. We also spoke with a local business owner tonight who told us she was devastated about having to close her business down not that long after coming out of lockdown. She'd also had a call saying that her granddaughter was one of the students at the school, which is now a Tier 1 site. She said it was a very scary phone call to get from her daughter this afternoon. Now, very clear in residents' minds tonight will be the outbreak in Shepparton almost 12 months ago in October last year that saw 3 positive cases in the city. Now, there was a really big response in testing from all the residents across Greater Shepparton, and residents are really hoping that that great response will continue again for this outbreak and quash it as quickly as they did last time.
Courtney Howe in Shepparton, thank you. As Melburnians endure a 6th lockdown, it's the lowest paid workers in the community that are often the hardest hit. Cleaners across the city are struggling, and many feel they're being left behind when it comes to support. Eden Hennanen has the story.
Paddy Dutt and his brothers usually clean 2 or 3 homes a day across Melbourne, but that's been derailed during the pandemic.
For a whole 1 month, I have 3 jobs. That's all I have. I don't have nothing for a whole month.
Now he's struggling to earn enough to support not just his loved ones here in Melbourne, but also his family in India.
Back home, I'm supposed to support my mother and my father, but I can't now because I only get so much money paid for it.
While commercial cleaning is permitted in Melbourne during lockdown, cleaning in occupied homes is not, unless for permitted care purposes. That means cleaners like Mr Dutt and Fung Lee are out of work.
I can't work because I'm work about home cleaner, so I can't visit the people house.
She's been without work for months.
I affect everything because I have the 2 boys. They went to childcare, family daycare, so have to pay the bill for rent and everything. Still have to pay.
Cleaners have received minimum supports. We've been lucky to see the state government provide some payments for people that are forced to quarantine. But for those that are stood down, the story is not having enough money to survive and being lucky if they receive anything.
The union says around 90% of cleaners in Victoria are first-generation migrants. Almost 40% are international students. Many of these workers are paid in cash and are not entitled to support payments, while others are now receiving a disaster payment of $750 a week from the federal government.
Still not enough to cover everything from us.
It's tough. It's hard every time we try and do whatever savings we had, we're just digging into that now.
They're Melbourne's marginalised workers, and many are falling through the cracks. Eden Hennanen, ABC News, Melbourne.